Hello, coming to you from the snowy city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Tundra Bryce, and tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust Geek List on Board Game Geek. The Out of the Dust podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 80. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Torres out of the dust and a contributor will dust off Doom, the board game. On the reaction segment, I make my 2021 predictions. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Holi, Festival of Colors. On the Up to Your Bryce Games segment, I review Cindr. And we wrap up the episode with my top 10 new-to-me games of 2020 countdown. I had a chance to bring Torres, the classic 2000 Spiel des Jahres winning action point allotment system game from acclaimed designers Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling out of the dust. I last played it 5 years, 3 months, and 2 days ago, which is a surprising amount of dust because I still consider this my favorite Kramer and Kiesling game. This latest play was on Yucatan in an effort to compile enough different game wins to level up. I'm usually pretty consistent about doing well in this game, but I guess the gap between plays showed because I finished a distant third this time. It's still as brilliant as ever, though. It's quintessential K&K goodness and its remarkable combination of elegance and strategic depth. Manipulating the board state and trying to position myself in the most advantageous spots is so satisfying. This play makes me want to break out my physical copy. My wife and I are planning a get-together with our closest bubble friends, and I think I'm going to add this to the bag. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Alexei Gartinsky, username Alexei Gartinsky, brought Doom, the board game, out of the dust. Doom, a 2004 fantasy flight release from designers Christian T. Peterson and Kevin Wilson, was in the dust so long for Alexei that he doesn't have recorded plays going back that far and estimates the dust level at least 10 years. He writes, my wife kept asking me to dust off Descent Journeys in the Dark, but as much as we both love playing it, it usually takes quite a bit of time. But the urge to play something dungeon crawly was too big, so why not dust off its glorious predecessor, Doom, the board game? We played it a long time ago, maybe in 2009, 2010, and both remembered how fast we were losing. So it shouldn't take too long. Spoiler, by now we've been playing it on and off for about a week already. Impressions? It's as great now as it was 10 years ago. Didn't age at all. Same agonizing choices, same pressure, same need for careful planning, same constant, meaningful decision-making. It's amazing how many of the latest games spectacularly fail to deliver similar experience. Drowning games and all sorts of complicated mechanics for no obvious benefit. Old is gold indeed. Thanks for the contribution, Alexa. I'm not a dungeon crawl fan myself, but I know people still feel the same way about this game as you do because I recently flipped a copy with little effort. Reaction segment time. This episode on the reaction segment, I'm going to make some predictions for 2021. We're only a few weeks into 2021, and already we've had a top 10 shakeup as Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion entered the top 10, kicking out Great Western Trail. Will it reach number 1? You know what? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say it happens later on this year. I think the game has enough raiders and enough enthusiastic ones to make that happen. One of the tragic victims of 2020 was the cancellations of cons, and it's been a popular prediction among people to speculate whether conventions will return in 2021 or not. It's tempting to draw a comparison and say that if tens of thousands of people can attend a football game, then why not a convention? But conventions, especially board game conventions, present unique health challenges by their very nature of requiring people to stay in close quarters with each other for extended periods of time. Con crud is a very real thing, and coronavirus only compounds it, especially with the possibility of new highly contagious strains. The early rollout of the vaccine has not proceeded very smoothly, and I think it will take most of the year for a significant enough population to be vaccinated to make a difference. But that's not to say that some clever person out there could develop a safe method for cons to happen that will satisfy and reassure attendees. So I'm going to strike a middle ground on this prediction and say there won't be any major international cons in 2021, but there will be some smaller local ones later in the year. With that in mind, and with another year to improve and innovate, I do think that virtual cons will be better attended this year, and establish a permanent place in the schedule for companies going forward beyond 2021. What will be the highest-ranked 2021 game? Well, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Frosthaven will claim that title. But to make things interesting, I will make a runner-up prediction and say that from Eric Lang beats out any other 2021 title by the end of the year. Which game will fall the furthest out of the top 50? Looking at the games currently ranked 40 through 50, there are some really good titles there, some of which are trending upwards, and some which I think should stay put. Some might fall out only because of displacement by newer, hotter titles. But one title in particular jumps out at me for being particularly vulnerable to a big fall, and that's Through the Ages. What industry trends do I think we'll see in 2021? You know what? I think we're due for the invention of a new mechanic. Obviously, I don't know what exactly that might be, but I think something is going to come along this year that makes us say, oh, why hasn't this been thought of before? Something significant enough to inspire a slew of so-called clones in the coming years, and inspire other designers to try their own variations of it. This week on the What I've Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Holi, Festival of Colors, a recent release from Madigo and designer Julio E. Nazario. Julio is a new designer with a trio of 2020 releases to his credit, and Holi attracted my attention because of its beautiful and unique table presence. Holi is a strategy game in which the action takes place on a three-dimensional board. It also features a charming and fascinating theme that deserves attention, India's Holi Festival, which apparently is an unusual celebration that involves splashing each other with paint. Here's how it works. The action takes place across 3 stacked boards divided into 6x6 grids. On their turn, players have the option of moving their enemy-meeple before or after throwing a color. Throwing color entails playing a pattern card from the player's hand. The pattern card features a 3x3 grid with some arrangement of squares colored in. A player selects one of the colored squares to represent their enemy-meeple, and then places their color tokens on the board in the spaces directed to by the other colored-in squares of their pattern card, following the rule that one color cannot cover up another. But if a color token would land on an opposing enemy-meeple, then that player gets splashed and takes the color token that hit them and displays it in their player area, and the player who splashed them scores a point. All players start at the bottom level of the game board stack, and if they maneuver themselves into a position so that they are surrounded by orthogonal color tokens of any color, they can climb a level and start throwing color from the middle level and eventually the top level. Color thrown from a greater height will fall to a lower level if there are no color tokens in the corresponding grid space below it, but will stay on the thrown level if there is. The game ends when all players have depleted their stock of color tokens or played their entire pattern deck. In either case, endgame scoring then commences. Some of the edge spaces on the board start the game with sweets tokens that can be collected by players ending a move on them, and whoever eats the most of these during the course of the game scores some bonus points at the end of the game. Each player scores 1, 2, or 3 points for each of their color tokens on the bottom, middle, or top level of the board stack respectively, and 2 points for each of their color tokens that splash someone else. In addition, nefarious-esque rule change cards might use additional end scoring objectives, which vary from game to game. I've been impressed with my plays of Holi so far and have really enjoyed them. I find myself getting sucked into the unique theme and getting into splashing my opponents and scattering my color tokens about as much as possible. The rule change cards add some interesting twists to each game and make each experience feel a little different. I appreciate that kind of variability in a strategy game like this. Unsurprisingly, from a Madigo game, the production quality is top-notch and the game is eye-catching on the table. The brisk pace and elegant, straightforward rule set makes the game a good candidate for a wide variety of playgroup opportunities. Pre-ordering this was a spur-of-the-moment decision for me, but I'm glad I pulled the trigger. There's a lot to like about the game, and it's the type of game that is a joy to share with others. Obscure Bryce game segment time. This week on this segment I'm going to tell you about Cindr, a cute casual game from first-time designers Harold Mikolaitis and Benjamin Walker and publisher Smirk and Laughter. Smirk and Laughter is not usually a publisher I pay attention to, but I was unable to resist the adorable theme, which calls on players to try to have more successful dates with dragons than their opponents, when the game caught my attention on Kickstarter. Since it fulfilled just a few months ago, it's hit my table pretty regularly, but it's definitely flying under the radar, racking up less than 20 plays a month. Should it be getting more attention? Here's how it works. At the beginning of the game, players select a character and select some compatibility stats for them regarding treasure, climate, lifestyle, and social preferences. At the beginning of each of their turns, players will select a dragon to go on a date with by either dating a dragon on the display or swiping left to discard a dragon from the display and putting a new one from the dragon deck into the display to take the rejected dragon's place. A player may do this up to 3 times before ultimately making a choice. Each dragon card has a little personal blurb about them, and players want to try to use this limited information to try to match up the dragon stats on the backside of their card with their own character's compatibility stats. How close the match is dictates what combination of colored dice a player rolls next. Different colors of dice have different quantities of sides with flames and sides with hearts, which are points. In typical press your luck fashion, players get 3 rolls of the dice to roll as many cumulative hearts as possible, with flames being set aside as they appear. If a player accumulates 3 flames out of their 4 dice, then the date ends in disaster and players score no points at all. Otherwise, players use a marker board to record their new tally of points, and the first player to get to a certain point threshold marries the dragon of their choice and wins the game! A deck of date location cards, dragon special abilities, and objective cards mix things up each turn and over the course from one game to the next. I'm not usually a fan of press your luck games, because I typically don't have much, or any for that matter, luck at all. But Cindr works for me. The fun theme undeniably helps a lot, but there's also just enough mitigation in the game in the form of consolation cards if a date flames out for me to keep playing and keep having fun while doing so. The brisk pace, a healthy dose of enjoyable tension, and all the variable components help to elevate the experience beyond what might have otherwise been a typical and inspired press your luck game. I was a little worried that I might eventually memorize some of the dragon stats, but the dragon deck is large and unpredictable enough that this hasn't been an issue at all. It feels more like satisfying deduction when a player is able to successfully compile an advantageous pool of dice by matching up common compatibility stats. It's an affordable game that is readily available at the moment, so if any of that sounds like a pleasant diversion to you, then Cindr is the rare press your luck game that I actually recommend. This episode, I am continuing my overview of my end-of-the-year top 10 list with my top 10 new-to-me games of 2020. These are all games that came out before 2020, but which I learned for the first time in the year. Number 10, Azul Stained Glass of Cindr. I had a chance to try out all the Azuls in 2020, and while I enjoyed them all, this one is definitely my favorite of the bunch. I love the movement mechanism that dictates which columns the pieces can be fitted into. It feels a lot more strategic and challenging than the other ones, and I always get that nice, satisfying feeling when I play it. Number 9, Pictures! What a delightful game this is! After inventorying a copy for the local board game cafe and trying it out with my family, I bought my own copy and it's been a regular staple of our family gaming since then. Despite never winning, my oldest son has declared it his new favorite game, supplanting Karuba. Its Spiel des Jahres win is controversial, but I think it's deserved. It brings something new and challenging to the creative deduction genre. Number 8, Luxor. This is one of those games that has slipped through the cracks for me despite being from one of my favorite designers, but when it was released on Board Game Arena I asked a friend to learn it so he could teach it to me. We liked it so much that he bought a copy for himself and gave me one for Christmas. I've already picked up the expansion and I'm keeping an eye out for the Queenies now. I love the card-based movement system and enjoy the limitations it forces players to work with. It's a very satisfying experience and I can see why it was a Spiel des Jahres nominee. Number 7, Isle of Cats. The theme is one of the most memorable of recent years, but the mechanics equal it. The combination of drafting and tile laying works really well, and I find myself really getting sucked into this game. I get a little sad when I have to leave cats behind, and I'm glad the rulebook included that bit about them finding another way to escape. Number 6, Fast Slots. I respect Friedemann Friese a lot as a designer because despite the length he's been in the industry, he's not afraid to try new things. I wouldn't say any of those new things have been particularly successful in recent years, but the continued efforts at innovation are welcome, and I'm always guaranteed a unique experience, if nothing else. But with Fast Slots, we did get both innovation and success! It's the best FF game in a decade, and a delight to play. I adore the theme, and the pick-me-up and deliver-me twist on a familiar mechanic is a super engaging puzzle. This is one I've gone out of my way to show to all my groups. Number 5, Age of Steam. Steam is one of my perfect 10 rated games, so it would be tough for anything to approach my love for it. and I do prefer it overall to Age of Steam, but that doesn't mean Age of Steam isn't a great game in its own right, and I appreciate the differences between the two systems, and I'm happy to have both in my collection. I'm running a monthly game of Age of Steam for what looks to be the foreseeable future as my main group explores the seemingly endless array of expansion maps. Number 4, On the Underground. This was a last-minute decision in backing the new edition when it was on Kickstarter last year, but I'm glad I did because this game has blown me away! This is an amazing system, and I can't think of a game that poses as fun a logistics puzzle as this one does. I can't wait for the new expansion maps to come out and see what they add to an already incredibly addicting game. Number 3, Teotihuacan. This was the rare game that I think I was the last one in my circle of friends to learn. But learn I did, and hooked I became thanks to it being released on Board Game Arena earlier in the year. I liked it enough to invest in the base game and all its expansion content, including the upcoming one. There's a lot to like about the mechanics and engaging choices that the game continually throws my way, but I must confess it helps that I think I'm pretty good at it, rarely losing in any of my plays so far. Number 2, Maracaibo. Maracaibo became one of the go-to games for my wife and I in 2020, and we're nearly done going through the entire campaign. I just enjoy everything about this game, the rondel, the card play, the economy, and point salad options, the ship upgrades. There's nothing that doesn't work, and each part is something I look forward to. But it's not quite Pfister's best design. That honor goes to number 1, Expedition to Newdale. I didn't think the Oh My Good system could be improved anymore, but the board game implementation of it is truly astounding. The combination of route building and engine building is super fun and addicting, and an Expedition to Newdale has become my go-to recommendation for people inquiring about engaging solo modes. That's something that Pfister has always seemed to excel at, but he takes it to another level with Expedition to Newdale. The story is surprisingly engaging, but the unique challenges of each chapter keep me coming back to try them again until I'm able to progress. All of the different boards are lots of fun, though I think I'll have to go with the Coast board as my favorite. The boards and their unique objectives guarantee an endless array of variability for multiplayer games too, and this is one I'm sure to continue to enjoy. Well, that will do it for episode 80. Thanks for listening. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust Podcast Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the Guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14 or user handle AnnLee14. Or email me at radagast14 at CenturyLink.net. And join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. Alright, play me out, Tananda!